Hello everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today. I'm joined by PaintShop Professional Carole Asselin, who will be demonstrating one of the most popular tools in PaintShop Pro, the text tool. Carole is a PaintShop Pro power user, and she's been using PaintShop Pro since version 7. You might be familiar with her from previous PaintShop Pro webinars she's been featured in, or as a scrapbooking specialist. She's been teaching people how to create digital layouts and designs using PaintShop Pro for several years. Carole has also coded hundreds of scripts to help designers, photographers, and digital scrapbookers work faster in PaintShop Pro. Before I hand it over to Carole, I want to mention this webinar will be recorded, and a link to watch the recording will be included in a follow-up email you will receive tomorrow. Additionally, as a thank you for your attendance today, I would like to offer you 40% off the purchase or upgrade of PaintShop Pro 2019 for a limited time only. You will receive a coupon code to redeem this amazing discount in the follow-up email tomorrow as well, so keep an eye out for that. As a final thank you, Carole has generously offered to waive the fee for all attendees of this webinar who would like to attend the class she's hosting on the text tool in PaintShop Pro, and she can provide a little bit more detail on that. The coupon code to attend this class for free will be included in the follow-up email you will receive tomorrow as well. So that takes care of all the housekeeping items from me. So now I'll pass things over to Carole.
Hi. So today we are going to look at the text tool, and the text tool is, well, usually used for text, but there are so many ways to use the text and so many settings to the tool in order to create various effects or projects. So at first, we are going to simply have an overview of the tool itself and the toolbar with all the settings. So when you start, we'll try to go more or less left to right, simply because, well, that's how it is. And so we start here on the presets. There are some presets, like most of the other tools, where the various settings are already decided, and you can download several presets already. Of course, you can also create your own if, for example, you have, let's say that you are working in a project or for a company that has particular colors used in the branding, a particular font. So instead of having to go every time with the font and adjusting the font, the size, the colors, and all that, you can set those as presets. And that would save time, and then you can always tweak, for example, for the size if the project is larger or smaller, etc. So these are the presets, and they really work like any other tools in PaintShop, where you can save them and retrieve them. Then we have here the choice of font. So I will start with just putting some text. And that text can be changed. This is the default that I had with Arial. And you can pull the font that you want. And interestingly, with recent versions of PaintShop, if you hover over the various fonts you have, you dynamically see the text change. So it can give you a better idea of what your text is going to look like. Sometimes you might think, well, this font looks good, but maybe depending on the particular characters you are using, whether you're using uppercase, lowercase, symbols, because sometimes some fonts don't have, for example, accented characters. If you are using French or you are using other kind of symbols, sometimes it just will appear as a rectangle. So I'll just give it a try. So this will be an accented character, that C, and you can look sometimes like there's no problem, but once in a while you'll get a font that might be interesting. I guess I can't find one that has no such, now where are they? When I'm looking, when I want to use a font, I can't get those characters, but then now I'm looking for one that doesn't have it, and they all do. Oh, here. Well, so all the letters are available, but that accented character is not available. So it would mean that if I am to write some text that has some unusual characters or not the basic ones, I should use this particular font. So do I have more? I should have more. Oh, there's one here. Again, it will just show as a rectangle. But having the ability now to hover over your fonts and decide if you want it is really great, because in older versions, it used to be, well, I think this one will look good. You had to select it, then the text would change and say, nah, that was not what I wanted, or it's too small or too large or whatever. And you had to go back all the time. So now it's really saving you time. And then you have the size. So as long as your text is selected, so like it's highlighted like this, you can change the size. So you can have 100, you have 30 if you want smaller, 200. It all depends on actually the size of your project and what you want to get. And you have the units. In the very old, sorry, the older versions of PaintShop, you only had the pixels used. But the points have been added. And if you notice the size in pixels, you change the unit to points, the value will change and it doesn't change the size. So this is very important. If you are, for example, either following a tutorial or giving instructions and telling somebody, well, I want to have the size of the text at a size of 100. Well, are you talking about 100 pixels or 100 points? They are different units, and your text will definitely be a different size. The pixels unit, personally, I prefer this because I use mostly digital projects and I keep them digital. The points is more if you are going to do some printing, and it seems to match the size of text like from print shops. Uh, Personally, I prefer the pixels simply because it typically will be matching closely, not exactly, but closely the pixels of my whole project. So if I want something that's going to be a text about 200 pixels, well, I will choose 200 pixels. It kind of gives me a better idea than having to calculate that, well, in order to get this 200 pixels height, I have to use, let's say, I don't know, by heart, let's say that would be 50 points, and it would be calculating all the time. So personally, I prefer that. But if you are in a field where the typical unit of the text size is point, then you have the option to use that. Then you have font styles, and the bold, italic, and underline have been around for a long time. Strike through has been added uh, in recent years, and then we have the superscript and the subscript that have been also added much more recently. And these are usually, you won't put the whole text using these, but if you are, let's say that I'm going to be putting first, well, I might want to have the S and the T as that small size of superscript. Or if you are writing, I would say, I'll just make another one, H2O. So if you are doing some chemical formulas, you might want to have the small size here. This is an option that really makes it much easier than having to separate those elements, change the size, align them, etc. So again, it's kind of a one-click process and you get it all. I'm just going to remove those two. So now we have the font color and you have the stroke color. If you notice, those colors will match what you have in your materials palette. So if I am to change the background or the fill property, let's say to green, you can see how it matches here too. So it will adjust. If I go on my stroke, I have the stroke changing here. And also what you can do is if you click on this swatch, you will get the same material properties window that you would get if you were to click in the swatches in the materials here. So it's really the same thing. And again, you can change and use color. You can use a gradient. You can see how it's changing. Or you can use a pattern. So for example, if I want wood, interestingly, it really doesn't matter where you go. The only thing that does not seem to match is if you choose a transparent, either for the fill, the stroke or the fill, it still stays here. It doesn't show as a transparent. So you can't switch from a fill or no fill with these two swatches. You have to do that in the materials palette. But it's very simple anyways. So those are where you can choose the colors. Then you have your alignment. So you can align your text left, center, or right. And the alignment will be based on where you anchored your text, or basically where you click. So for example, if I click in the center and I write the word align, you can see that it is based on where I clicked. So it is aligned left. So my anchor is on the left. I will highlight it, and if I change the alignment to right, you see that it will be leave my anchor on the right. And if I go center, well, it is what it is, just as you would expect, and it will center. And it will do that for all the lines that you have. So let's try to do the same thing on this one, which has two lines. So I double click and highlight it all. You can know here that my anchor was here, just to the left of the upper T. So if I change the alignment to center, you can see it's going to be centered based on the click here. And if it was right aligned, it would be based on here. So it's really out of the way now. And for the justify, this will only work for the text wrapping, which we are going to look a little bit later. Here we have the direction, and this is kind of fun. Typically, we know we write from left to right, top to bottom, but occasionally we might have a project and we want to do the other way. So maybe we want a title or something like that, and we don't want to actually rotate our text. We just want the text to go and have vertical alignment of the letters. So I'm going to just use the align word because it's going to be shorter. And if I change my alignment, you can see, whoops, hey, it changed. Who is it? That is strange. It's not doing what it's supposed to, what I would expect it to do. Okay. So I guess there must be another way. That's called live presentation. So I was supposed to be this. Okay, I guess it changed in recent version. I had not used this function in a while. Typically, it was supposed to have the letters still facing the same way, but one below each other. Well, we can find another way. In PaintShop, there are many ways to achieve the same thing. So we can find another way, and we'll look at that later. Here is the anti-alias. We will find anti-alias setting in many tools, whether it is for selection or such. And what it means is how smooth the edges are going to be. So I'm going to just delete these, and I'm going to show a demonstration of the 3 settings. So if the anti-alias is off, I'll put, let's go back to that. And I'll just make in black, I'll write off. I'll try to find a thicker font. Okay, so this would be if the anti-alias is off. Now let's try with sharp, and I'll write sharp. Now I will try with smooth. Okay, so we have our 3 texts. From a distance, they might all look fairly similar, but if you start to look closely, you see how when the anti-alias is off, the edges are very jagged, very rough, and you see all those pixels. When you have the sharp, it is better. You can still see the jagged edges, but you also have some smoother edges or pixels that are fainter, which gives a better result. And then if you use the smooth, you can see how it is much smoother. The effect will also depend on the size, because if you're working with very large size, the jagginess, if you can call it, might not be as obvious as if you were to use a very small font. Because when you use a smaller font, you have fewer pixels to work with in order to create that shape. So it's going to be more obvious. By default, it's set to sharp, and that is fine. You can leave it like that. You just have to remember this is an option if you are creating something and you find that the edges are really oddly shaped and you kind of wonder like what is going on. Well, you might have accidentally clicked this and changed it. It's so easy to, you move your cursor and you click by accident. Now we have here the stroke width. So we have the white outline that is supposed to be seen, but here in my materials palette, I had it as transparent. Let's put it back. And we have, I'll just change the color so it's going to be more obvious. And we have here the smooth, because that's the word that was highlighted. And if you increase the size, it will increase your stroke. Well, my stroke is not continuous, and that's because my line style here was set to not be the solid line. So if I go with solid, why is that? Okay, I think it's having a bit of a hard time with this. That's weird. Okay, let's try another one. I can remove this. Okay, I'll try with another word. Maybe I'll try with the off word. And put it back. That's odd. Maybe I'll try another one, another word. I'll just close those. And let's say that I'm going to be putting before. I'm going to change that to the solid. Strange, it doesn't want to change. It was changing earlier. I was having fun showing different font, different line styles. But now it does not want. Well, I certainly don't want to restart my PaintShop. Line style. That's weird. Okay, so this is what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to change and have different line styles that you can use. They are the same line styles as any vector shape that you might have. So whether you want to create a circle or a rectangle or any other shape, you have different types of lines that you can use, and you can create your own. There's one here, and this is the one that seems to be stuck in. It's a stitching. It's one that I created myself because I had the small dash, but I wanted to have a different format. So it's very interesting that it's not coming back, but we can live without it. And now here you have different ways that you can create your text. You can use them as vector. This is probably the most common way that you will create your text, or you can have the text created as a selection or created as floating. So when you create your text as a vector, it will have the ability, oh, I don't like that outline. I'm going to go down to 0. So it's going to be no outline. So if I create my text and I accept it, as a vector, I'll have the vector layer and the object, and I can always come back and edit my text. This is a great advantage of using a vector, which also means that if you're creating, for example, a whole project that has different text and titles and everything, you cannot add bevel or shadows or other texture effects on the vector layer. You would have to convert it to a raster. But once you convert it to a raster layer, you cannot edit it anymore. So I always recommend to people, before you actually add a texture of some kind, you will I'll just turn it to red, for example. And what I'll do, I will right click, duplicate, and one layer I can right click and convert to a raster layer. So now I can add an inner bevel if I want. Because I could not do it on the vector. However, the advantage of keeping a copy of the vector layer is that if you come back later and realize, oh, well, this bevel is too much, or I had a typo, or I want to change the font, you can just scrap your raster layer and you still have the correct font and everything used with your vector. So that's really a good trick to remember to use in order to not lose the work you had done before. So this is how you would be using your vector. I'll just remove this and I can unhide. Now, if you are to use it as floating, For example, I'll start with my raster layer, the background layer, which was completely empty. I will fill it now just with a gradient. So I have a background. So here, let's see it better. Now, if I go back to my text tool and I have it floating, I can write the word, and maybe I'll change the color to black. Earth. And as soon as I accept it, you can see it is floating. It's created on a new raster, not on a new layer that is floating. It's not a raster. And you can use the move tool and you can move it around. You can decide where you want it. So maybe you tried to place it somewhere and it was not perfectly aligned. You move it and you can leave it like that, but to keep it floating is not much use. And you can right click and defloat. And notice now it merged to the raster layer that you had before. You still have the selection, so you can deselect with Control D. And now your text is part of your background. So that has some use. I tend to not like this simply because it automatically merges with the background, and I like to have my layers separate so I can tweak them later. But again, it's all a matter of what you are using it for. And now, if you want to use it as a selection, let's say that we put this text. Once you apply it, notice that you lost all the colors. It's only a selection. What you can do with this selection, you can do what you want. You can fill it with something else. You can use, for example, now it has a selection and it's on top of my background layer. I can right click and promote this selection to a layer. So I have here the word selection. Or let's undo this. I could simply copy with Control C and paste as a new image, and I have my word here. And then using the move tool, I right click and I can move somewhere else. Maybe I want to have a selection here. Copy this and paste as a new image, and you can see with the same selection I got several different colors, and I can move here. Maybe not the best idea. I have my word here, but I can copy and paste, and you can see I have different colors because I used a different part of my starting image, and it's exactly the same size, font, and everything. So that is how I use my selection, but I can also put it somewhere and flood fill. Let's say I'm going to be changing that to, let's say, yellow. I can flood fill. Notice it's all again on my raster layer. Or what I could do, I could prevent this and create my raster layer separate, and then I can flood fill this area, this selection, and deselect with Control D. And now I have my word on a different layer. So this is how these settings, the way you choose to create your text. I tend to prefer to keep it at vector. Now, another kind of fun thing, I'm going to remove these, is, and it can be fun when you want it, but it's not fun when you are getting something and wondering what is going on. So let's write the word, for example, I will write the word again. I will highlight it, and here there's a little button that says remember text. You highlight it or you click on it and you accept. Okay, Now I want to do it again. I simply click on my work and the whole text comes back, the same font, the same size, the same color for another click. I click here. This is accepted. So if I click to anchor the word, I get another one. I accept it. I get another one. I accept it. So that is great if you actually want to have those words over and over, maybe on different projects, but it could be also very annoying if you are wondering like, why I want to write another word. Why is it always putting this word? That is because of that. So in that case, you would make sure that you have some text highlighted to deactivate this, because you cannot deactivate it if you don't have some text that is highlighted. Okay, so this will kind of give an overview of these, and there's also a few settings in here. You have the leading. Leading will determine the spacing or the line spacing between several lines. So if you have a paragraph, you can choose to have minus 0.1 and the lines are going to be closer together or more apart. So it depends how much you want to cover an area. You have here the kerning, and you can see in this case, it will space out the letters. And we have the tracking, and the tracking will do kind of the same as the kerning, but a bit more. So I'm not exactly sure what the actual value is. I never use the tracking. I always use the kerning. I find it's more precise. You can adjust. You can have your letters closer together also if you want. You know, some fonts are spaced a certain way, or maybe you want to have something that is close enough that you can maybe cut out and have a single shape. And you can also, what is interesting is that you can change the kerning between only a few letters. I can't. Okay, so I can reduce the kerning only on those between those two letters and not affect the rest. And this is another thing that you can do with any text that you have, is that you can select one character or two or three and apply various changes. You can change the bold, italic, underline, strike through. You can even change the color to something else. And you can change, let's say, the other color. I'm going to right click. By right clicking, you get the last 10 colors or patterns you used and the 10 standard ones, if you can call it like that. So goes faster. And you can have that gradient. Well, it doesn't show much. I can decide to have a different gradient. And here, so you can see how you can have a whole rainbow, or you can alternate. You can have red and blue, and red and blue, or red, white, blue, blue, white, red, whichever you want. You can just play around with these. And also, one great advantage of PaintShop is the ability to customize your workspace. And this also applies to the text toolbar. You can customize and choose which setting you want and which ones you don't want necessarily to have visible, but you just want in that extra window. So for example, if you want to have the kerning, you can click on it and you can see how the kerning will appear on your work, on your toolbar. You don't want it, you remove it. If, for example, the direction here, is something you never change. You can remove it and it will make some more space. So it all depends on the actual workflow you have for your particular type of work with PaintShop. So I'm going to close this, and now I'm going to show you a way that we can use all that knowledge and create something fun. So with the text tool, we are used to, text editors, and we write in straight lines. But with PaintShop, we can have text on a path. So I'm going to use my pen tool, and I'm just going to use a stroke and make a line like this. As long as it's a vector, now that I will activate my text tool, I will change now from a stroke to a fill, and my alignment will have it left. See, this is on a path, and you see how it follows. Well, let's undo this. You notice that my text cursor looks like this, and as I get close to the vector, see how it changes. When it changes, this is when you can click, and right now I probably moved it a little bit beside so it's not following, but this is a path, so it will follow. If you are having a hard time grabbing the line, you can also put this is a path, and in the layers palette you can select both. So holding the shift key, you have both, and under objects you have fit text to path, and it will go directly onto it. So that's kind of cool. It's a good way, and also it can allow you to say, well, I'm not sure, I don't like this path, maybe I will remove it. So I can again go object and detach the object from the path, and I can change my path. Maybe I want to remove this one. Maybe I will want to add this. Select both, go to object, fit to path, and now it changed path. Well, this is kind of a fun way that you can place your text on path. But we are going to create something even more fun. And I'm going to create some kind of a postmark or a stamp. So using my ellipse tool, I will create a circle using an outline. I don't need a fill, although I could use a fill. So this is a vector, and I will add some text on top and around. So I'm going to anchor in the center because I want to align center. Oh, I'm not sure if I got it, but let's see. Okay, so this is a webinar. So we have the text, and although the text is on the line, I would like to have it off the line. And this is where I can change here the offset. Notice I'm going to go with 10, and the text is going off that line. Let's go to 20. And here it is. So I will accept. And here you have, this is a webinar. Now I would like to add at the bottom about the text tool. So typically what I would maybe expect to do is do the same thing. Click here. But In this case, it's not very easy to read, although sometimes you might want something that really goes around and around and around, and you really don't mind having it upside down. But in this case, that's not what you want. You would like to be able to read it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to remove this. I'm going to delete it. Just delete this text. And I would need to get another ellipse to tweak, because what I want is change direction. Right now it's going clockwise. I would like to have it counterclockwise, but I cannot change from clockwise to counterclockwise for two different texts. It's going to be everything clockwise or everything counterclockwise. So the way to solve this problem is to right click on your image and you duplicate it. So that way you're sure you have exactly the same size for the ellipse. And the text here you can just remove. I'll just remove with the delete key. But now I said I have to remove or change the path. Typically, if I create a path with my pen, it's going to be a path. If I use the ellipse tool or the rectangle or others, even though it seems to be a path, because you know it followed the path, if I right click on my ellipse, I have here that I can convert it to a path. And it's kind of an oddity. If it's not a path, this is going to be grayed out. But this, no, if it's already a path, yeah, you can't convert to a path. So I'll convert to a path. Notice that the little icon beside my object here is a shape, and this one is different. It's a path. Now that it's a path, I can right click, edit, and reverse the path. So instead of going clockwise, it's going to go counterclockwise. So I'll activate my text tool, making sure I'm using the correct ellipse. And let's change here about the text tool. Oh, a typo too. So my text is in the right direction, but it doesn't look great because this is on the outside of the circle and this is on the inside. What I can do, I select it all and I go back to my options, and my offset now, instead of being 20 pixels, I'll go with -80. And now it is on the other side of my path here. So if I want to keep my circle, this is fine. But if I don't want it and I wanted to use it only as a way to anchor my text and make the shape, the worst thing to do will be to hit the delete key. Because what happens is I don't have any path to follow. So I'll undo this. So if you don't want your circles, you have to hide them. So you can hide your circles, and now you have your text all along a path that is just invisible. And if you want to have some fun, you can add, I'll just add another circle that I can adjust, and I have something like this. Once I'm happy, I can merge everything if I want, and I have some kind of a fun postmark or stamp or something like this that you can use. You can add a design in the center, or use it however you want. Okay, so I'm kind of wondering at this point if we have questions that we have to address, or if we can go with another project.
Hi, Carol. Yeah, actually, we do have 3 questions maybe I can bring up now.
Okay.
The first one is just wondering what the difference between a raster and vector layer is.
Okay. A raster is like a drawing. It's fixed and it's designed with the raster with pixels. The vector is more of a calculation. So you can actually, it's like, for example, you have a circle. I'll just make, oh, if I make a selection that is a circle, I'll make it small and I fill. This is where I have all my pixels and I cannot enlarge it very well without getting something jagged because it's not set that way. So it really will affect like images and everything. While if I use a vector, it's kind of calculating where the shape should be. So if I enlarge it, it recalculates. So my edges are going to be very nice all the time versus what I would get for raster. So maybe I'll adjust the color. So it's white. So let's see. You can see how the edges of the white are like blurred. So if it's just an edge, it might not be so bad. But if you have a photo, for example, and you want to enlarge, that's what happens. And on raster layers, you can apply effects like a bevel, like a texture. You cannot do that on a vector because it's mostly just the outline that is calculated and you don't actually manipulate the inside.
That's perfect, thank you. Another question is there a way to make a drop shadow on text?
Yes and no. There is a way, and let's see it. Let's try this. Typically, you're not going to be able to add a shadow because the shadow needs to be applied to a raster. So if I have my text here and I want to apply my drop shadow, it will ask me to convert it to a raster layer, which I could do, but then I lose the ability to edit my text later. So one way around this is a little tricky, and would be to not convert them, but I'll duplicate it and I can convert this one to a raster. So I can either add a layer to this, no, a shadow to this layer, or and keep my vector hidden. Or another way that I found, let's just remove this, is that you can make a selection. No, under selection, you get a selection from your vector. You can get the selection and on a new raster layer, now you can add a drop shadow. So you can see, I'll just make the shadow red, so it's just going to be visible. And I can deselect with Control D. So you can see I added a shadow, but it's on a separate layer. And if I was to hide my text, you can see how it's only the shadow. It's not exactly the same thing, but it's a way around when you don't want to convert your vector to a raster, or you don't want to bother with a duplicate and another raster. There are often more than one way to do something with PaintShop.
Perfect. Last question here is there a way to add custom fonts?
That's an interesting question. You can install any font you want on your computer. One way I found, and maybe I'll have time to do that if you don't mind. I'll go with There is one, I think there's more than one. This is a font viewer. It's the font thing. And you can navigate and use just about any font that you have installed or not installed. And this is the beauty of this this trick, is that, for example, I have like thousands of fonts, but I don't install them all because I really don't want to have all those fancy fonts appear when I use Word, for example. There's really no point. But if I use, for example, this one, uh, if this font is visible in this browser or this previewer, okay, so this one is B650, and you go to your paint shop with the text tool. I'll just use this one, and I'll add some text. You should be able to see that. Was it B? Here, you can see that font now appears in my list of fonts. So I can have text. Here. So this is the font that I had visible here. And it could be really interesting because sometimes you might want to have some dingbats, some fancy fonts. I don't know where I would have some. Here, there's a set of dingbats. So if I want to have these ones, so circle, it's visible. I'll go back to my paint shop. I'll select. Notice that here my text changed back to a default font because this one font is no longer viewed. So I'll go with the circle. See here, it is. And I guess I'll have to increase my kerning. Oops. Something's going oddly, but you can see that you have letters. Maybe it's the spacing of the others, but you can have all kinds of fonts that you don't have to install, but when you are using some font viewers, not all of them do work. The font thing works. I'm still using Windows 7. It works fine. I don't know if it works on Windows 10, but it's something that, you know, people can have a look at. So that is how I use new fonts and not have to install them all on PaintShop.
Perfect. Thanks, Carol. That's it for questions. So if you wanted to continue for a few more minutes.
Don't know if I will have much time, but let's try. So if I create a project using this, I kind of started before. So Valentine's Day was last week. So what I can do is use various fonts and create a fun project. So I just layered all the various words with a little heart. And let's say I want to take one word here. I will highlight it, change the font. Let's move it a little bit on the side so I can see better. And I'll take this font and this one word I'll change and maybe select it all, choose a different font. That's a little bit too much. Okay, so it's going to be narrower, so I can move it here. See, there's going to be enough room. Maybe for the word cherish, maybe I will rotate it so I can go to image, free rotate, rotate right, 90 degrees. And maybe I'll put that word here. And maybe I'll stretch it. So you can see how you can play around your text and have different fonts. You can even change the color. So instead of just black, you can maybe go to red. And you can have another word. This one I'll rotate the other way. So maybe I'll put family here. And adjust. You can change the fonts. You can change the size. You can adjust. If you're using a corner handle, it will keep the proportions. If you need to distort the proportions for some reason, maybe you want it taller, or on the other hand, you might want it narrower. Like for example, if I have hugs and kisses, maybe I just want them really close together. It might depend on the font you are using. Let's try to find something. Okay, this one is not bad. So maybe I can stretch it to fit in the hole that I created. Here it's too wide, so I can narrow it, but there's a gap so I can play around. So maybe I'll just adjust this one to be a little here. And so my Valentine can put here. And maybe the I love you, I'll make it taller. And I'm just trying to get it within a particular shape. In this case, it's a square. It could be a heart. It could be a circle. It really doesn't matter. And then when you're done, you can choose a color. I'm going to make, I'm going to choose an outline color and use a rectangle and create a frame around it. And now I have a nice frame that I could print if I want, depend on the size that you have. But in this case, since everything is a vector, you can probably enlarge it and you will not get anything blurred or pixelated or anything like that. You can create that. You can add, I don't know, a photo. You can have a date. You can use this for your Valentine. You can use that for, birth announcement or anything you want. And you can either print it, cut it out. We have those cutting machines now that can create decals and so on. So it's one way to use the text tool and really have fun with it. And you can have all different fonts, different colors, different sizes, etc. So that's another way to use the text tool for something fun.
Well, thanks, Carole. I think we're just about out of time here, so I think I'm going to wrap things up.
Okay.
I just wanted to thank everyone for attending our webinar today, and thanks again to you, Carole, for the excellent presentation. Just a reminder to watch for the follow-up email that will come out tomorrow, and that will include a lot of really great items, including a link to this recording of the webinar, your discount code to purchase or upgrade PaintShop Pro 2019 at 40% off, and a coupon code to attend Carole's next text tool class for free. So thank you.
Carly, I would clarify that it's a class, it's not a live class. So it's a recorded class that you can access anytime.
Perfect. There you go. So all of that will be in the email follow-up that will come out tomorrow. So again, thanks everybody, and thanks Carole, and we'll see you all at the next webinar.